Maybe if I open the blind. Can you figure it out? I'll open the blind.
Okay. I don't know where you are or what you're doing, but when you come in.
Bravo. They're laughing because I could hardly wait to hear that. Hi, I'm Bridget Belinsky. I am Aunt Dottie's niece, Dr. Dorothy K. Billings, as many of you may know her.
Where is she?
Organizer with my family and my chosen family members here locally, because as you know, Dottie was not someone that just had friends. You were more than friends. It was an incorporation into our lives. So we're really happy you're here. I'm sure you're going, what kind of event is this where you eat and memorialize somebody? It's really a celebration because that's what Dottie did. I'm sure many of you sat in small rooms with her and chatted and argued and discussed and philosophized and made summations about things together, and it went on for hours, and there may have been alcohol. Just saying, for the record, that's usually when it got a little crazy. We have many of you here. Thank you for being here live, and we have a bunch of you on Zoom. So we have people from all over the world kind of calling in, and hopefully we got the time zone correct. That's been a little bit of a challenge. And then Becky Bushka has been phenomenal at building our PowerPoint history of Dottie. Can I just say there's about 2,000 more photos we could have used. So if you feel like you're missing or want to see something else, please see us and we will get that organized for you. Here's how the agenda is gonna work. I'm gonna kick us off a little bit of family perspective. And then we have what we thought were gonna be 4 or 5 speakers turned into 9 speakers. And I know there was several that wanted to go additionally, and we just couldn't squeeze you in. Otherwise, we'd be here for about 10 hours, which I know Dottie would also love, but I'm not sure we could fit that all in people's schedules. She is special. And then just for logistics, the bathrooms are just out the front door and to the left of the front desk. Please eat while we are presenting. That was done intentionally, once again, as sort of a communal coming together of friends and family and conversation where food and beverage sort of happen. I'm sorry there is not alcohol. That just felt difficult to but you can have it later if you'd like.
I don't want to try it. I can't
So
swallow.
the setup is community, social gathering, making people feel something, and hopefully we get that done today. I'd like to share a little bit now about my amazing Aunt Dottie. First of all, as a little kid, I thought she was Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, and I thought it was really weird that she landed in Kansas. And I'm sure that is like a running joke around the planet, and I think that her name Dottie in Australia was particularly funny for them. She was a strange and unusual and memorable aunt. Can I just say for the record that Christmas was terrifying. The presents she would send us from Australia, usually we would stand back from them before we opened them because they were things we had no idea what they were. And they were frightening and black and had loose pieces of plant life usually falling off of them. But memorable, and honestly, she was the topic of every single Christmas celebration is who's gonna open the Aunt Dottie box? I know all of it was an attempt for us to understand because I don't know if you've all ever received something from Dottie, but there's usually a little tiny note attached to it with the history of where it came from and what it meant to her. And as we've been sorting through her things, we've gone through millions of those things. So she's left this amazing historical trail about herself. The other thing about our Aunt Dottie that we really loved is that she is an amazing listener and fascinated just by human beings in general. So as little children, we felt incredibly listened to by her. And then as we grew up, my family ended up in the hotel business, which was a stepfather story that is another strange journey. But she really liked that we were in the hotel business because this is where all humans were, every kind of human on the planet. So we had to sort of debrief her all the time and the different people. And just to show you how interesting we were to her, I have 4 family members here. How many of us were in the hotel business? Okay. And yes, the eclecticness of that and the coming together, the gathering and all that was really something that she loved. Rich with human insight, she used to say. I used to brag about her. I was an executive with Marriott Hotels, and I used to brag about her in women's leadership conferences all the time. Such a great female role model to share leadership about bravery, confidence, taking leaps of faith,
If you
pushing
move, we'll
against
have light
things
on
that
our
are wrong,
faces.
standing up for
What?
oneself.
Move around
We
that
show
way and
images
we'll
of
have better
her,
light on our
and just
faces.
showing a female in New Guinea, and at that time in that time of our world was mind-blowing to young women coming up and afraid to try to get to the next place. So she was an amazing role model for that. She's memorable too. Funny things about her, I think, is just that in a strange way, she was sort of fashionable.
Oh, here we
You know
go.
what I mean? I mean, it is like scarves, glasses, jewelry. We are wearing things that this little thing that I'm wearing, I've had for 40 years. She brought it back from Papua New Guinea. It goes on every trip with me. The fact that she went to Papua New Guinea has informed everything about my life and traveling and seeing as many of the people of the world as we can. My husband Kaz and I have been to Cambodia, Thailand, Burma, Myanmar, Vietnam, Africa, we a million countries we've been to, and we try to get in with the people. I try to pretend that I'm like her, but I'm not quite as fearless as she was. I think we'll probably hear some stories about Hugh Baby the car. Does anybody know Hugh Baby the car? My brother and I had to reupholster it on one visit here. It was not fun. We went to the fabric store and she gave us the staple gun and we redid the inside. So if you hated it, it was us. She has a color is something about my Aunt Dotty that I really think about, is how brilliantly colorful she was as a personality and just as a human. But I want to know, I am responsible for the teal long coat that she wore. We went to buy coats together here in Wichita, and she wanted a brown coat, and we had a big argument about brown versus teal. And she bought the teal coat, and I noticed as I'm looking through photos, I think she wore it for about 35 years, so I was really happy about that. The delightful squint. You know, she pursed her lips and closed her eyes and just make that little face. Something was so delightful to her. She just loved it, and I loved seeing her delighted. And that laugh, what the heck was that? The laugh just made us all giggle. And I think for me, I'll kind of kick it off with that because I don't want to steal everybody else's thunder. But I think there was missing one thing, affection for animals. I think she actually had whole conversations with them and was able to translate because she spoke pidgin. I think there was some relationship with the animals. I don't know, but that was special. She spent a lot of time hunting for our personal heritage about indigenous people. I mean, this is her world. And she was sure, 100% sure that somewhere in our genetic history and profile, there was somebody indigenous, and that was the hunt in our family side. So I know we didn't discover it. We thought we had a moment and it wasn't true. So I will continue the hunt for that, I know. But she fell in love with a quote that's in our house, that's from Chief Seattle. And it is, if all the beasts were gone, men would die from a great loneliness of spirit. For whatever happens to the beasts happens to the man. All things are connected. Whatever befalls the earth befalls the sons of the earth. And she loved that so much, and it was in many, many places. So what I wanted to say is we have a code word when we think that Dotty is speaking to us from wherever she is. That is also a topic for debate, I know. We don't know where she is, but if she is listening, which we think she is, the code word is wombat. Because none of us knew what a wombat is till our Aunt Dotty went to Australia and got her PhD there and did all her journeys. And she had a wombat stuffed animal that she slept with every night. So if you see a wombat, know that Dotty is speaking to you. All right, thank you for letting me kick us off right now. I'd like to introduce my Uncle Jim, James Phillips, who we all know was the love of her life and knows her more intimately than the rest of us. So Uncle Jim, you're making your way up here. It's all yours.
Well, thank you very much for coming. I want to thank everyone in the room, but also our about 27 people appearing by Zoom in other parts of the United States and in other countries, I should point out. Dotty lived life to its fullest. I had a great life with Dotty. Dotty took seriously but humbly everything she did, whether as a scholar, teacher, activist, wife, or friend. She was passionate about global education and the need to banish nuclear weapons from the planet and to achieve sustainable human development. And she gave at least 12, 13 papers just in recent years on the question of sustainable human development. Earlier, she was involved in the nuclear freeze movement back in the 30s.
I think we should let
80s.
Alicia
And some of you may remember
turn
that. Some of you may remember the Ground Zero Conference, which Dotty and Lou Goldman organized in 1986. Some will remember the Sunday night lecture series, which Dotty's War and Peace Group sponsored. Later, Dotty organized the Global Studies course at Wichita State, which she taught for many years.
She taught.
During the past decade, she focused on protection of indigenous lands, resources, and cultures from developers and government or their government allies. Many of her speeches in recent years in 12 different countries were on the subject of developers versus the rights of indigenous peoples to their lands, resources, and culture. She was very concerned with that, and we developed a great relationship with a number of people in an international organization, and some of them are on Zoom right now. Even in her last
Is
year of
that
life,
work for you? Is that why you're doing
before
it?
her relatively
Yes.
sudden and unexpected death on August the 12th, she wrote another book, spoke at academic conferences by Zoom, and a few weeks before her death, she spoke at a meeting of a local community group. Dotty and I were partners in life and work. Our love for each other was at a very high level. I cherish my life with Dotty. I miss her deeply. We were involved in each other's lives. Earlier in the law, later in my teaching and research, we were involved. We were almost always together. So these are very difficult times for me. Now, the Wichita NAACP in 2009 awarded Dotty the Chester I. Lewis Distinguished Service Award for, quote, publicly supporting causes which favor equal opportunity and change. Dotty inherited from her parents, Neil and Gladys Billings, a set of principles which I believe helped cause her to identify with ordinary people from the villages of New Guinea to the streets of Wichita. Dotty never hesitated to challenge conventional views,
Okay,
including even those she agreed with.
I'm gonna sign off.
She didn't like the word critical thinking, particularly. She thought that was probably maybe Foucault or something. I don't think Foucault started that at all. It was actually Marcuse, but she was a critical thinker, even though she did not uncritically accept something just because it was the dominant narrative. And of course, as Bridget pointed out in her program here, Dotty, as an anthropologist, always thought it was important to find out what the people say. What they have to say is awfully important. And so she put a lot of emphasis on talking, having interviews with the people she studied. She studied, of course, in the islands of New Hanover and New Ireland and New Guinea. She was very close to the people there, and she was in touch with them, visited them many, many times. And Jens will probably talk about that a little later. Now, I wanted to quote from a newspaper, the Wichita State University Sunflower. That's a student newspaper. And the paper had a story about Dotty. On April the 9th, 1975. And in that article, the newspaper says, Dr. Dorothy Billings doesn't look like a troublemaker, as her innocent blue eyes peer behind her owlish glasses. These are the owlish glasses. But according to her, she has been tagged with that label. As one of her fellow professors put it, she always has some cause going. And continuing on with the article, one of her colleagues described Billings as, quote, a bit opinionated, but went on to clarify, she has definite ideas, whether it's anthropology theory or men-women relationships. Another professor said, she's really not opinionated because she does listen to all sides, but once she decides, she carries through to completion. Now, in summer of 1982, Dotty spoke at a large rally in support of the proposed Equal Rights Amendment in Riverside Park. A few might have actually been to that rally. Becky was there, right? Good. That was a large one. The Wichita Eagle printed Dotty's speech in its entirety on July 18th, 1982. They put it on the op-ed page. In that speech and article, Dotty suggested that such icons as Linda Brown, Sojourner Truth, Jane Addams, and Emma Goldman had to make progress. Had to make trouble, I should say, to make progress. And Dotty used to tell some people, particularly young people, make trouble, but she meant work constructively for basic changes. So I believe if Dotty could speak to you today, she would ask you not to mourn, but to make good and effective trouble. Thank you. Okay, now I'm going to introduce our next speaker. A woman that Dotty thought a lot of and supported her in her campaigns. I knew her, or had met her mother on several occasions. Her mother was a fantastic community organizer, a great advocate for the poor and the disadvantaged. Her daughter got elected to the Kansas House. When I heard that, I thought, wow, that's great. And then later on, she got elected to the Kansas Senate. And I can't remember what your name, the number of your district. We're in District 29. See, she's my senator, and all those of us that live here in this district. So now I want to introduce to you Senator Aletha Faust, one of our best senators.
Good evening, good afternoon. Thank you, Jim. You know, you didn't see Dotty without seeing Jim. You know, they were just connected at the hook, and however, he rarely talked. I think today is the most I've heard you speak ever. And where's Becky? Yes, thank you so much for reaching out to me to ask me to speak. It's truly, truly an honor. I, in the 80s, as a student here at Wichita State, I needed to complete my courses. I needed a full little package. So I decided to take an anthropology class. And so Dr. Billings was my professor. And I didn't really think, what am I going to get out of this anthropology class? But I got so much out of it because of the professor, the person teaching it. And Jim, she did share with me that she knew my mother, Aretha Faust. And actually yesterday, on the 28th, was 21 years since my mother, since I lost my mother. And so she passed away a couple of weeks after 9/11. So yesterday I celebrated my mother, and Dottie always spoke highly of her. I recall the last time I interacted with Dr. Billings was she sent an email to myself and to Senator Carolyn McGinn, because we both serve on the Senate Local Government Committee, and there was an issue going on here at Wichita State, and she wanted us to know about it. And she did. And so she not only emailed us, she called us on our cell phones and the office phones. And then when she saw us in person, it just worked out. Senator Carolyn McGinn and I were at the same place, and we saw Dottie, and Carolyn McGinn said, "Here she comes." And so she was like, we need to, and she not only advocated for things, as Jim Phillips said, she actually got in there and did the work. And so again, I'm truly, truly honored to read this official Senate certificate. I just have a copy. Becky, I'm going to email the actual copy from the state of Kansas. Ironically, mail, when we request certificates from the Kansas Senate, in Topeka, believe it or not, the mail goes from Topeka to Kansas City and then back to Topeka to Wichita. So I don't have that with me to present officially, but I will read what will be in the statute books forever with our dear friend's name. And so it reads, the Kansas Senate, a tribute, be it hereby known to all that official recognition is extended to Dorothy Dotty K. Billings, PhD. The Kansas Senate and Senator Aletha Faust extend our heartfelt condolences to Jim Phillips, the family and friends of Dorothy K. Billings. This grand lady, affectionately known as Dottie, was a proud professor of anthropology and most importantly, an advocate for social justice, who worked hard towards good public policy, equity, and equality for all. She has left a mark for justice in the hearts and minds of everyone she encountered. And we are better agents for change because of Dorothy K. Billings. And she will be missed deeply by many far and near. And again, it's just an honor to stand here. I would see her everywhere I went, and I mean, she really was everywhere, and she changing the conditions of life for the better for all people. She truly, indeed, wanted to make that positive change. And so, again, my condolences to the family, especially to you, Jim. It's going to be so different seeing you without her. And so you have my prayers. Thank you so much.
Thank you, that was wonderful. And thank you for that gift, Senator. I would like to take a moment just to recognize the band, the drum group, right? Because I think some of you have. They're going to entertain us a little bit later, they promised, but they're representing the Seneca, Ojibwa, and Dakota Sioux tribes. They're called the Rutledge Family Drum Group. They are Teoma, Kino, Kinu, I'm sorry, Kinu, and Bo. You're wonderful. Thank you for being here. Okay, now we have Jim Radigan, friend of Dotty, previously Vice President for Student Affairs and Dean of Students here at Wichita State University. And I think I've seen his name on signs more around town than any other name that I've seen. So I'm especially excited that he is here.
It's hard to look at me and think older American. But I woke up the other day and I thought, well, I'm 87 years old now, my life's half over. I did notice in the program today that all of Dottie's friends and their different places that they came from. You don't see one say anything that says university administrator. And not a criticism, just observation here. And I have balance problems. So after you've seen the full of me, I'm going to sit down and make my few comments sitting. I have found that if you fall over as a speaker, it's a distraction from. So I'm going to sit now, which probably this audience could figure out. I guess I could say that Dottie was my professor too, but we've had, I had hundreds of lunches with Dottie because I ate on campus, and up at the ballroom, the old ballroom was a dining facility. And faculty all ate there, those that were there. And then when that closed up down in the student center now, we had certain tables that were used primarily by faculty. And I often ate with Dottie. I had unequal experiences there, which I'm just going to describe in a minute, but they were all extremely interesting. Probably me. Maybe I was better the other way. So the first thing I have to observe about Dottie was her love of students. she had specialty interests, like anybody who was marginalized and mistreated. I mean, I heard about all those students. And Dottie sent lots of students to me, and I was very appreciative of that. It actually extended my own sense of influence because of her. I did caution her at times because she gave some of her own money to students. I advised her not to do that. I said, for everyone who generally needs that money, they're not hard for you to believe, but there are hustlers out there. She said, I understand, but I had the feeling I was going to be ignored on that one. The epitome of my experience with Dottie and these types of people was a day in which I felt I should attend the graveside service of a man I won't identify completely, but his first name was Carlos. And he was a victim of cerebral palsy, and he was very smart, but his body really didn't work at all. And he alienated many, many people, his own family included. He was kicked out of the timbers, but I got along great with the guy, and he had his own way of doing things, and I'm not going to deviate from my little script here. You're all going to think 9 of these people is almost a sign of panic if you look at your program for today. But when I arrived at the graveside at 9th and Hillside, one person was there, and it was Dottie. And so just the two of us had this very rare experiencing together. Moving on, there was the other side of Dottie that I experienced. I was often the proxy for everybody in the campus she was mad at. Be it president, vice president, dean. I mean, I played the role of foil, and she was very as vigorous with me as if I were the real person. So I said, well, Dottie, you know, the name is not the thing itself. And this didn't seem to make any difference, but I had so many bad experiences that occasionally I'd have to go back to my office after lunch and take my drug of preference, which is Alka-Seltzer. And my longtime colleague and secretary said, if I just wouldn't go out in the rain if I were you. He said, you're going to just fizz away. And so the themes of our arguments were many, too many to declare, but you could count on the fact she was vigorous in her views. The one time that I saw her one-upped was she was having a very vigorous discussion with a man named Perel. He was a mathematics professor. And they were having a vigorous disagreement, which I was kind of enjoying because I was just sitting there watching it. But she cursed at him. And he didn't seem to mind, but we went on with the discussion. The little man came up on a little student. He said, are you a professor? She said, well, yes, I am. He said, you shouldn't be talking that way. And it's the only time I ever saw Dottie was just nonplussed, had no response. Well, I think I'm about done here with my 5 minutes. I knew Dottie for over 50 years. I count her as one of the people that I remember best, respected, and was fond of personally because of her personality. And it was really fine when Jim asked me if I would say a few words. Thank you, Jim.
I'd like to introduce Professor Jens Kreineth, dear friend and colleague. Anything else we want to call him? Okay.
Thank you for asking me to speak. It is a great honor for me to commemorate one of my great colleagues. Dorothy K. Billings received her initial training in 1951 at Radcliffe College at Cambridge University, Massachusetts, with a stipend at the Radcliffe National Fresh Scholar. However, she stayed not long. After completing her freshman year in 1952, she transferred to the University of Wisconsin at Madison, where she completed her undergraduate study in February 1955 in American institutions. I don't know what this degree is, but anyways, thereafter she was a recipient of a Fulbright scholarship and spent the remainder of 1955 in New Zealand to take her undergraduate and graduate courses in anthropology at the University of Auckland. Here, she had the privilege to participate in a senior seminar that tackled the controversial question, is anthropology an art or a science? It was co-taught by a professor in psychology and anthropology and two of his senior lecturers, each of them taking different sides on the issue, while one of them, namely William Robert or Bill Geddes, argued multiple positions, played the devil's advocate, pondered, and finally said, I think it is an art. As Dotty wrote 35 years later in a brief book chapter, Is Fieldwork Art or Science? A little off-print I received when I came here as a visiting professor. She wrote, quote, I have never forgotten that particular session. Even the outstanding practitioners of our trade disagreed, respectfully, and with extreme concern with the fundamentals of our discipline. Even more, I think this unique encounter with Bill Geddes changed the trajectory of her life, as she already admitted her, Geddes, as her graduate student at the University of Auckland before she even completed her Fulbright scholarship. Upon her return to the United States, 1 year later, 1956, Dotty received her graduate and postgraduate training in Columbia University under the guidance of world-famous anthropologist Margaret Mead. From 1959 to 1963, she taught courses in primitive art and religion at Brooklyn Museum in New York. In spring 63, she served as an instructor for the anthropology department at Hunter College in the Bronx. Before the then moved back to Australia with Bill Geddes, the chair then of social anthropology, who offered her a position as senior tutor in anthropology at the University of Sydney. During that time, she met Nick Peterson, who helped her to get settled at her later fieldwork site in New Ireland, Papua New Guinea, from where she aimed to get research permission, some successful, some unsuccessful, and to get access to the Johnson cult in New Hanover, for which she later became famous with her book called Cargo Cult as Theater, Political Performance in the Pacific. I will give some details of this cult in a minute. While waiting and jointly carrying out some field research in the tradition of social anthropology, she trained as a cultural anthropologist too, Nick Peterson and Dotty Billings came across two previously unrecorded archaeological sites, a cave site and a small gallery of a rock painting, resulting in their first collaborative publication in the journal Mankind. During their fieldwork, they also collected some information about the Malangan ceremonies and artwork, studied them in conjunction with the traditional forms of political leadership, called Memai, the kind of a big man. Dotty Billings continued her fieldwork on her own later in New Ireland from 66 to 67 with funding from the University of Sydney. The interest in studying the interrelations between art, ritual, and politics, as embedded in the Malangan, continued to intrigue her throughout her life, leading to some of the most significant publications and contributions to this field of study, and lasting for over 55 years until her sudden death this summer, when she still worked to finish her last book on the Malangan ritual ceremonies and art forms. As I already mentioned, a related research topic on the Johnson cult on the neighboring New Hanover Island, on which she conducted fieldwork from 67 on. Later, she coined the Johnson cult as a form of political theater, in which half of the population of 7,000 in New Hanover rejected to follow the prescribed balloting procedure to choose representatives for the newly formed House of Assembly as part of the Australian government. Instead of voting for any of the candidates listed in the ballot, the cult members thought outside the ballot box, proclaimed via billboard announcement and through their spokesmen that they all want to vote for only one man, President Lyndon B. Johnson of America. Instead of paying council tax and in doing so risking imprisonment, the cult members aimed to save the money for a flight to the United States, or better, to bring Johnson to New Hanover, a belief they never gave up. Hence, the member of the Johnson cult were seen as crazy, mainly by the Australian government, who abandoned them years before, considering that the cult did not have a prophet or hardly any leader, and that the only ritual they performed was to raise their hand for the vote. Dorothy Billings succeeded to identify the intricacies in the social and political dynamics of this cult as a matter of style, taste, and preference, or simply, as she later put, as aesthetic truth, or a form of symbolic politics. As she put it, quote, "When I was trying to make sure that I understood what Oliver meant when he said he believed in America, he said, just like, that's all. In other words, we like Johnson of America, that's all." And in doing so, she finally dismantled the cargo cult as a political theater that only worked on the symbolic universe to irritate political actors. And I think you can resonate with what you heard before. Throughout all her fieldwork and research, beginning in the 1960s and 70s, she continued to engage with the social and political issues of globalization and sustainability, as Jim pointed out so nicely, that the local population faced, she engaged with. While still finishing her PhD thesis at the University of Sydney, she first accepted a visiting lecture position in anthropology at the University of Minnesota, Minneapolis, just for one semester, before joining then the newly established Department of Anthropology at Wichita State University in fall '68, which was founded by Lowell D. Holmes the previous year. Throughout her not always easy career at Wichita State, as you heard, she taught a whole array of undergraduate and graduate courses, out of which I would like to mention just a few: the anthropology of modern life, love, hate, and jealousy in other cultures, performing art in other cultures, cultural change and modernization, and for me, most interestingly, the ethnography of Wichita. Just imagine. It was one of the topics courses in cultural anthropology. And as I know, and some students know too, she always took students to the local community and just let them sit there and write their notes and make observations. Besides teaching, Dotty contributed to the different endeavors and entities at WSU. And here again, significantly, from 1979 to 81, she served as an ad hoc film committee to develop a minor in film studies, something we now have. But just imagine, this was quite some years ago. She helped to develop the Women's Studies program in 1972, one of the first of its kind in the United States, for which she taught also women in other cultures. In 1985, she initiated and coordinated an interdisciplinary course on peace and war studies, which featured 23 faculty members, 17 departments, and 4 colleges. I don't know how she managed this. She later published about her complaints of how this worked. You can all read this in one of her publications. Her commitment to international intercultural education, joined with the outreach to the local community, is also reflected in her art exhibits here at WSU. For the opening of the new Museum of Man, as it was called, now it's the Holmes Museum, at the Department of Anthropology, in 1975, she made an exhibit on comparative art in New Ireland in New Hanover, which remained on display until 1979. 3 years later, in 1982, she organized and again, that's quite significant too, an exhibit on Asian art and cultures, which was assisted by the Wichita Asian Association. And she displayed art objects from the local community in Wichita. Beyond this, she remained a political activist throughout her academic life. In 1979, she was president of the American Association of University Professors for the local chapter of Wichita. Among her many talks at local, regional, national, international, professional venues, one talk stood out to me as very striking. It was in July 1988. She gave a talk on the anthropological contributions to the study of peace and war at the 12th International Conference of Anthropological and Ethnological Studies in Zagreb, formerly Yugoslavia. The year before, Slobodan Milosevic was sent to bring calm to an ethnically driven protest by Serbs against the Alban administration in the Kosovo, which led up to one of the most devastating wars in Europe. The title, Place and Talk, it was just months before Slobodan Milosevic was instituted, further south if you want, showed her courage and sensitivity to address the most pressing issues of the time, and by doing so to demonstrate as a person and a scholar her concern about the fundamentals of her discipline and its public responsibility. Dotty Billings was passionate about the people and the cultures she engaged with. She cared a lot about her profession as a cultural anthropologist. May she respectfully remembered as a humble anthropologist who considered her profession to be an art. Thank you. Shall I continue?
We're going to do Jay next.
Nick Peterson or? Shall I read Peterson?
Oh, yes, go. No, we're going to, yeah, go ahead, that's good. So Nick Peterson wasn't able to join us from Australia because the time difference is a little awkward, but he did send something that Professor would like to share with us, so go ahead.
Okay. So Nick Peterson wrote, I first met Dotty in 1965 when she was a senior tutor in anthropology department at Sydney University and appointed me as one-term tutoring position. Dotty was a great breath and a fresh air there as the department still looked into British and social anthropology, as I myself. I well remember an argument with Eden Hogbin in a tea room with Dotty advocating for the importance of cultural style, such as in different ways of walking, which he saw as frivolous when compared with kinship. She had come to Sydney because of her friendship with Bill Geddes, who had taken her on as a graduate student in New Zealand. She was able to make her a senior tutor when she moved to the chair of anthropology in Sydney. She had yet to carry out her doctoral fieldwork. There were two difficulties. She wanted to study the President Johnson Kauka cult in New Hanover. New Guinea couldn't get a definitive clearance to do so from the district officer, who was fearful that her Americanness would inflame the situation. She was also concerned about there being free, prior, and informed consent by the New Hanoverians to her project. But of course, she knew nobody to ask. These problems were paralyzing any departure. In a rather gung-ho 24-year-old, I was quite happy to help her turn up and negotiate on the spot, and so galvanized her into action once the term had finished. The first crisis of her was the day we arrived in Kavieng, which is north of New Ireland, found that the only place to stay was in the whites-only carving club, faced with an alternative of having to sleep on a sandfly instead of infested beach, pragmatics and comfort won out. Ironically, she ended up getting quite friendly with one of the two of the planters, which say so much about Dotty's openness to the world and taking people on her own terms. I never knew her to be defensive, but always generous, loyal, and encouraging of others with whether they were going, and never punitive or resilient from her deeply held values. A wonderfully quick-witty, impish sense of humor and distinct laugh were always a powerful commentary and contribution to every occasion. She had such rich and heartfelt relations with her many New Ireland friends that not only enriched her life, but also have enriched the many students who were privileged to know her. Nick Peterson, Australian National University. If I may, just want to at least announce one greeting from two of her other friends, Andrew Strathern and Pamela Student. She also sent in an email, quote, Jens, can you read a little message from us conveying our warm feelings of appreciation for her life and the creativity she breathed into her own work on movements and change in Papua New Guinea, captured in her perceptive title, Cargo Cult as Theater, a rare and precious contribution to this complex theme by a rare and precious person. Here are the offprints on the Johnson cult, if you want to see them. I will put these on the table. Thank you.
Are you done?
Yes.
I just want to make sure. That was lovely. Thank you so much. All right, we have Dr. J. Mant, friend,
Hey.
but what he wanted me really to say is that
Excuse
they
me,
fought many battles on campus together, so this should
Becky?
be entertaining.
Becky.
Thank you. I was probably one of the most unlikely friends Dottie had in so many ways. Becky is shaking her head. We became, well, I met her the first day I was on Wichita State campus interviewing for a job. My department took me to lunch at the cafeteria. Dottie was there, and she got into a shouting match with the senior member of my department. And I liked her instantly. I don't remember what that debate was about, but I had to know more about this person. And what I did was, because she was very friendly, of course, and she said, when you come to town, you have to get in touch with me right away. So when I did come to town the next summer, before classes started, I had arranged to live at the Wheat Shocker where Dottie lived. And I arrived with a friend from graduate school at Vanderbilt who used his VW van to get my stuff out here. And I got into my apartment, and the first thing I did, literally, was to go up and find Dottie's apartment and start our friendship. One thing I forgot, in the pictures, I gave her away at her wedding. I didn't even remember that. Well, if you were inclined to look for practical solutions to problems based on compromise, Dottie was not your ally. Why shouldn't we simply do the right thing? Was her take. That was her take on just about every problem. This attitude had many expressions. If you were her friend, then she was on your side absolutely. If you were in need, she helped you, no matter how inconvenient the service was for her. I can't remember ever trying to get out of a sticky situation. I can't ever remember her ever trying to get out of a sticky situation by leaving someone in the lurch or turning away from someone in need. I know I quickly gave her my absolute trust, which she never abused through 40 years of intimate secrets from my life and my family's life that could have been embarrassing if she'd ever mentioned them to other people. And that trust lasted through many incredibly nasty arguments we had about all sorts of things, like all her friends, like Jim Radigan. That was part of your life with Dottie. Well, because to her friends, To her, friends and family are people to be trusted and to be trustworthy with. And so, since that's what's true and that's what's right, that's what she did, absolutely and unconditionally. No matter how many times you mess things up or were stupid, or however wrong-headed she thought you were. She taught me to think like an anthropologist, to cultivate a certain observational distance and see people in their cultural settings. This was a valuable perspective to gain. She made me a lot less insular in my outlook on all sorts of things. In return, though I'm a philosopher by trade, I was also an historian by avocation, and I tried to give her an historical perspective. That was a lost cause. Dotty was utterly innocent of historical knowledge, although she often listened with interest to my efforts to point out historical parallels to contemporary events. She also had an almost 19th century view of scientific truth. It was no use telling her that most findings in science are really statistical probabilities, not certainties. To her, facts were facts. Science was our guide to them. She was always suspicious of the powerful and established in any situation, as others have mentioned, always on the side of the poor, the forgotten, the seeming losers. And that held even when the outs weren't very attractive in their own right. It simply never occurred to Dotty to choose sides based on what she could gain by doing or choosing one side or the other. I've been trying, since she got ill and I knew she was going to leave us soon, I've been trying to figure out what kind of person she really was in the end, in a kind of anthropological manner. And these are my conclusions. Dotty was all in all an old-fashioned idealist. She saw the good in everyone, even in those she had fought tooth and nail. At least once they were brought down and had become the underdogs in their turn. Some of the administrators that we jointly fought against over the years for causes at the university, if they lost our struggle and they became kind of persona non grata, Dotty took them up. Very characteristic behavior. She seemed to think that perfection was within reach, and certainly worth striving for. Winning half a loaf never quite looked to her like a win. And yet she would count up the small victories won in the pursuit of her causes, for they were evidence that the cause wasn't hopeless, that the calloused and uncaring could perhaps be woken up and won over. An idealist indeed. Once she had taught me to think like an anthropologist, my own youthful idealism took a back seat on many occasions. Dotty and I often agreed about what we observed going on around the world, but we were often disagreed about things happening here at home. Dotty was really down on American individualism and had a keen insight into the cruelties it can lead to. She disliked competitiveness, loathed sports. How Jim, who's a sports lover, and Dotty stayed together through Saturday afternoons, I don't know. She hated capitalism. I often tried and always failed to get her to examine our country and its culture with an anthropologist's eye, to see all the too typical American behavior as an expression of our culture and not as a recalcitrant wickedness. And in this, I always failed. Dotty's idealism and perfectionism when it came to her own society would not yield. In the past few years, I finally came to an understanding of this. It used to drive me crazy. Dotty was a consummate American character. Her idealism echoed the abolitionists, Dorothy Day, Eugene Debs. Her ahistorical way of seeing things is an enduring American trait too, one that fueled the pioneers as they trekked west, shaped the American sense of mission overseas. Dotty didn't like these things, so central to American history, but she embodied the same core quality of pure idealism, the ahistorical vision, and in her own secular way, even the sometimes apocalyptic religiosity that has shaped much of the American moral character. Also very typical was her deep-rooted belief in the perfectibility of mankind. So, Dotty, sorry to say it, but you were a truly classic American original and a great individual, the likes of which none of us will see again.
Thank you, Jay. We are going to try, in the spirit of Americans, to do a Zoom presentation. We have a couple people who like to speak electronically.
I'm gonna be speaking. Okay, how do I get up here? I thought I was on. Hello? Am I on?
Hello? Hello?
Who is speaking?
Gary Greenberg.
Oh, okay.
Okay, who's going first?
Looks like Gary Greenberg.
I think I was
All right.
supposed to, all right, go right ahead.
Please.
Hello?
Not rubbing your beard.
Yes, please go ahead. We can hear you.
Who are we talking to?
To you.
Gary Greenberg?
Yes, Gary Greenberg, yes.
Okay, thank you. So Dorothy Billings was my friend, and I'm sorry to have to make that statement because I've made it too often recently, having lost so many who I was close to. I can't really recall when we met and under what circumstances, but I'm sure it was soon after she came to the campus. I think Jim Radigan used a figure about 50 years ago. And we became friends quickly. I think it was a result of our similar political and social views and values. It was because we were both for the underdogs, she more so than most, and that we thought nothing of challenging authority. All of those who are here today know so much about Dorothy that there is not much more that I can add beyond some personal memories. We were partners in championing the idea of tenure for professors. The two of us were among the last of the Wichita State University activist AAUP members. And about this, all of us are meeting here at the place where we fought so many battles against what we thought were unjust policies of presidents, of vice presidents, of deans, and of the almighty Board of Regents. We led the battle to organize the professorate, preparing the way for unionization if that ever came. Surprisingly, I was recently reminded of a short article we jointly wrote and was published in a psychology journal in defense of the tenure system in American higher education, which I understand from a distance is under attack in the state of Kansas. But you know, Dottie found a way to find friendship with many of those she opposed, especially with Vice President John Brazil and LAS Dean Paul Magelli. And of course, she treasured her friendship with Vice President for Student Affairs, Jim Radigan. She was a genuine scholar who loved the library, and she railed against the elimination of that old-fashioned card catalog when we made the transition to the digital replacement of that old behemoth. And along the way, she alienated Jasper Shedd, who was then dean of the library. Despite their very many battles, she was instrumental when he set up the library reading room where current periodicals and books could be easily accessed. Despite her many confrontations with the WSU administration, which are legend, she was a positive force for the university. We have her to thank for making the university a leader in the teaching and promotion of awareness of global issues and of women's and minority studies. She always advocated for fairness, and she sued both the anthropology department and the university for equal pay for equal work, a lawsuit that still today, many of us are surprised to learn that she lost. How could that be? She championed and she supported and fought for underdogs, all kinds of underdogs, for those many others ignored both on and off campus. She was active in several sectors of Wichita's minority communities. She frequently attended services in African American churches, but she was at best a weak religious agnostic. She is known, of course, in anthropology circles for her work in New Guinea, especially for her analysis of the Johnson cult, described in her book about this. Her many friends there have acknowledged her passing, which was recognized by a full-page obituary in a local newspaper, The National, which said, Dorothy Billings will forever be a part of Lovangide Village, a New Hanover Island. They refer to her as Dorothy. It seems that she can never stay still, and her lust for travel brought her to so many places around the world for professional meetings and also to see new places. She and I traveled together on 2 occasions, once to attend an AAUP meeting in Madison, Wisconsin, her alma mater, and once to attend a joint professional meeting in Poland, where she dragged me to many activist places in Poland. And several of our mutual international friends have shared their sadness over her passing with me, and at least 2 of them are present here by Zoom. So yes, goodbye, my dear friend Dorothy. Despite the few spats we had in our long friendship, we wouldn't be family without them. I will forever miss you. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Herb Lewis, who is also on Zoom.
Am I here? Yes, there I am. Thank you for inviting me to speak about my friend and colleague, Dotty Billings. Dotty and I first met when she came to Columbia Graduate School in 1956. She had graduated, as you just heard, from the University of Wisconsin, which back then was but a myth in the mind of this New Yorker, though it would become my home for 60 years and counting. At the time we met, I was not aware of the kind of socially and politically conscious background a Milwaukee girl like Dotty could have, with a socialist father and a socialist mayor of whom she was very proud. Dotty became a welcome member of our cohort in the anthropology department, our students, and a few of us became particularly fast friends. We supported each other and shared our growing anthropological knowledge, as well as our political understandings. But although she was very close to Margaret Mead at Columbia, Dotty chose to pursue her doctoral degree at the University of Sydney, and she and I lost contact for quite a long time. By 2000, we began to meet again at conferences of the American Anthropological Association and the Central States Anthropological Society. And from then on, we were united above all by email. Dotty was a most interesting and passionate correspondent, even if she must have had the spell check off most of the time. Those of you who live physically closer to her, family, students, friends, allies in humane, social, and political causes, can speak much more knowledgeably than I about those aspects of her life, and I have already learned a great deal today, for which I'm thankful. My close relationship with Dotty during the past 2 decades has been related to her love for the people she lived with in the Pacific, and for the cultures of the world, and for the anthropological enterprise more generally. Dorothy Billings believed in the anthropological and humane value of living with members of other cultures, close up where they live, and learning from them. She cherished finding out how people in other places live, think, and create knowledge and art. And this is what came through to me in those passionate if sometimes mysteriously spelled, emails. Dotty Billings believed, above all, in old-fashioned anthropological fieldwork, living among a group of people, listening to them, watching them, seeing their creative processes and the results. She enjoyed writing down the stories they wanted to tell about themselves. She wrote to me, "I like the idea of indigenous knowledge being at the heart of anthropology. Therefore," she wrote, "I have found refuge in the journal of the Polynesian Society and in the journal Oceania. They are still about ethnography and other people, not all about us folks, clever enough to cite the French." She had no patience with incomprehensible theory and academic pretense. As she once wrote to me, "What matters is, have these critics ever produced a good, caring, respectful record of indigenous people's creations and histories?" And as a person born into a socialist family, in a city with a socialist mayor, who had been involved all her life in causes on behalf of the oppressed, the needy, and the marginalized, she had no tolerance for self-righteous Johnnies-come-lately who would uncritically but fashionably accuse her teachers and friends of complicity with colonialism and worse. Some years ago, Dotty sent me 2 lines of a poem that she liked. She had translated it and quoted it to one of her professors. It channels Moses, who said to himself, quote, "Must I live always, powerful and alone? Let me lie down in the sleep of the common man," end of quote. It was all about people for Dotty, common and uncommon, in general and in her anthropological work. She had great love for the people of New Hanover, New Ireland, New Guinea, and I believe that those who knew her reciprocated that love. I have lost a great friend, as they have, and you have, and so has the field of anthropology. Thank you.
Thank you from our friends afar. That was really great. And we enjoyed every minute of it. I love technology. Okay. So our next group is Father Stephen Booth, who is friend of Dotty. Okay, for presentation from the podium. What do you
Yes.
think?
Yes.
Thank you. Good job.
I met Dotty around 50 years ago. And I was staying with a friend in Wichita. It was before I became a monk and a priest. And one of them came running up to their room where I was sitting and reading a magazine and said, "You've got to come down, I think, to the 4th floor and meet this professor. We think that you'll like her." And I went down there, and there started a 50-year friendship of resonance that is where heart speaks to heart. We understood in the first hour and a half of our meeting that we both loved Leon Bloy, Marc Chagall, Eric Satie, Penderecki, the Polish musician, Blake, and even Eckhart. I also found out that day, I had just been introduced to some of the Greek fathers of the church. And she asked me, "Have you ever heard of Clement of Alexandria?" And I said, "Well, yes, I've been reading 2 of his books. One is called the Proseptikos, which is a very timely insight into what makes a human personality human." And she started to discourse on that. I don't know how, she never explained how she came to read Clement of Alexandria. But Dotty opened up to me then the possibilities of a new song. And what do I mean by that? She taught me that humanity is a musical instrument. And in my context, for God. She allowed me to see in my own context that humanity teaches about divinity. I'm reminded of several visits that she made to me. I lived in Canada most of my working life. And I remember one trip she made with Becky Bushka's aunt, Annika Allen. And they visited me in British Columbia, where I was working as a chaplain in the Canadian federal prison system, as well as taking care of a much beloved Ukrainian parish. And on that trip, I had within my parish 3 native indigenous reservations I had to visit once a month, in addition to the regular Sunday liturgy at the parish. And the farthest one was 3 hours up at the tip of Vancouver Island. And so she went up there with me and met these Salish natives, and she was just fascinated. And I got to see firsthand how she worked as an anthropologist and what kind of questions she asked. And I understood then that in her questions, her observations, and her answers, she allowed them to question her, that was putting to proof that humanity is a musical instrument, that it teaches us something if we're only able to see and hear it. A second trip that we made together was from Vienna to Poland, to Krakow. And I mean, I find this kind of humorous. She did too, but not all of it. What she found interesting was that there were 3 Polish ladies and a couchette on the train, and the 2 of us. The Polish ladies found it interesting because I was already a monk and a priest, and they just found it odd that we would be traveling together, and odder still that we would share a couchette with them. Dotty stayed up all night from Vienna to 10 the next morning to Krakow, speaking to them, and she spoke neither German nor Polish, and neither did they. They spoke Polish, but they didn't speak English or French, which she got by in. And so I would wake up occasionally and say, Dotty, aren't you ever going to go to sleep? I need to get some sleep. And she said, well, these women are so interesting. And I said, well, how are you communicating with them? She said, I can only say that it's in the international language of anthropology. When we arrived in Krakow, we got off the train, and on the platform was a little Franciscan friar. The Franciscans are an order of mendicants in the Catholic Church. And he was walking up and down the platform. And he was quite small, short. And he saw my collar and walked up to me, and he said, change money? And Dotty was along the side of me, and she heard him. And I said, Father, do you speak English? He said, yes, yes. And then she said, Father Stephen, don't you dare. It's against the law. And I said, yes, but you have to realize all these people function on the black market and on, the international exchange among thieves. And so we changed money. And she reprimanded me for a whole half a day for breaking the law of the Socialist Republic of Poland. Anyway, Dotty embodies for me somebody that I heard described once in a poem by Thomas Merton. And He said, with all her eyes, she explores life. And that's how I'll always remember Dottie and how I will always miss her.
All right, our next speaker is Becky Bauschka, who is friend and family officially, especially after this week.
Well, hi, team. I figure if everybody's here, we must be all on the same team. It's great to see everybody here, and I'm grateful. My name is Becky Allen Bushka. I am Dr. Annika Allen's daughter, if many people here know her. She was a chemistry professor and former associate dean at Wichita State. I'm here today to represent Dottie's Allen family. My family connection with my wonderful Auntie Dotsy began when I was young. My mom and Dottie became close when their friend, Professor Dr. Ernie Bubenic, became ill and stricken with brain cancer. Dottie and my mom rotated taking care of Dr. Bubenic during those times, and they became close. My mother and Dottie were as different as night and day. My mother was quiet and reserved. Dottie was not. They were two strong and different women with like hearts. I met Dottie when I was a preteen during the 70s, right after she came to campus. She was curious about people of all ages and backgrounds. As a tween during my struggling years, she validated my feelings of alienation because I was intelligent and different. I don't think it helped that I grew up to 5'9" in 7th grade either, to be honest. Growing up, we didn't have family close by. My mother was from the Netherlands. So my mother created a small knit group of Wichita State faculty and students, and we call ourselves the Orphans. We are still together to this day. When someone doesn't have a place to go during the holidays, there's always room at our table. After my mother passed away, my older sister Mary hosted many of the holidays, and then Dottie became our matriarch. I have a few random, it's an emotional day for me. I have a few random thoughts and memories about the essence of Dottie. The first word I can use to describe Dottie is passion. If she fought for something, she gave it her all. I know she made the world a better place. I remember her stories of her indigenous friends and what she learned of healthy, kind, and grateful societies. She spent a lifetime fighting for their rights. She was kind and accepting of all people. She fought for those without voices. She taught me to fight for those without means. And who doesn't remember Hugh, baby, your old car? He had more rust than paint on him. I still miss him. He was a great car, honestly. I remember my mom, Dottie, Gary, and Jay debating at the top of their lungs at my house, screaming, only to be friends within minutes. Jim would just sit there and laugh. Dottie had an eye to see greatness in all people. She was the person who gave you grace when at times you didn't deserve grace. Dottie spent many years telling stories about my mom to my kids because my mom died when she was young, when they were young. She made sure that they knew their grandmother. I can still hear Dottie's laughter. Most importantly, she was family. One of her greatest gifts to me in my lifetime was being my passionate Auntie Dotsy. I love you, Dottie.
And our last speaker, and then I'll close for the day, is Dr. Leslie Page. dear friend.
Okay, so now that Father Stephen and Becky have brought me to tears, and I confess I had to go home and find my reading glasses. This is a Dotty habit. I formed this as an undergraduate when I met Dotty. If it's important, put it on a file card. And you can have the file card in your pocket, in your purse, which I learned over the years I don't carry, in your wallet, wherever, tucked in your underwear if necessary, but you will have it on a file card. So, first thing I want to do is to thank Bridget and Bruce and the Billings part of the family, and that includes you, Kaz, for coming from California and being exquisite organizers. The venue, the food, the program, the everything. I don't know what we would do without you. And yes, we are an extended family, or as Dotty might say, extended kinship. Dotty, it says in the program, Dotty touched hundreds. No, Dotty touched thousands of people and lives all around the world. And I think my daughter, who wrote this while Dotty was in the hospital the last time, captured something about Dotty. Dotty is a beautiful human who puts humans and their total realities above everything else. Thank you, Katie. And Dotty taught me a number of things. And by the way, when I got my master's in public health here at Wichita State, Dotty was my qualitative methods person on my master's committee. So bless her, I might not have made it through that MPH otherwise. But one of the things she taught me, one of the many things she taught me, was that people learn from each other through stories, through their stories. So I have two things, and then I'm going to tell you a story very briefly. Some Native American tribes in their mythology think that the lights in the sky at night that we call celestial bodies or stars are portals where the ancestors look down and approve of us humans, us mortals. The 12th of August in the night sky had both a full moon and the peak of the Perseid meteor shower, for those of you who aren't oriented toward astronomy. And that will become important because I'm going to tell you about a dream that I woke up from at 4:30 in the morning on August the 12th. One of the great pleasures that Dotty and I shared was she played the piano and I don't. And we would get together and she would play and we would sing Broadway show tunes. And we were at the piano in her apartment, and she was dressed in a long white gown with little embroidered flowers. And I remember this very clearly. And we were working our way through the score of The Sound of Music. And we got to doe deer, a female deer. And all of a sudden, the ceiling disappeared, and Dotty rose up off that piano bench and into the night sky. And it was so vivid. So what I did, because I'm a retired doctor, I woke up at 4:30 in the morning and I called the nurses station on 8 Tower and said, would you please check on Dr. Billings? Because I thought maybe she had let go. And she was still with us for a significant portion of the rest of that day. Bless you, Dottie, wherever you are in the stars. Thank you.
Hey, can my family come up and stand here? Because we have family watching in California, and I can tell they want to see that they're alive. Yeah, that means you're my brother. The brother, husband, nephew. It's been great. And I had thank yous to say also to everyone here in this room. The amount of love and care for Dottie is unbelievable. It's deep, it's rich, it's funny, it's meaningful. I mean, it's just, we have been swallowed up by this family that are her friends in Wichita. And it's been fun to listen to everybody. Jay, oh my gosh. Might have been a lot younger, but boy, do I remember some of those conversations and arguments, and to be able to rethink about that was lovely. And Leslie, I didn't know the whole dream. She told me that in the morning of the day, and I didn't know that it was doe a deer that you had heard, because on that same day, as I was driving to the hospital, 3 deer ran in front of my car. And I came in and I said, are there deer in Wichita, Kansas? Because I don't think I've ever seen them before, but it was like eye-opening for me. And so that felt sort of like a magical moment. Becky, this is not happening without you, 100%. She has scooped us up and said, I will make this happen for you, whatever you need. Many of you have spoken through Becky to figure out how to get here, and here we are. Thank you so much. Family forever. Kaz for organizing the parking and keeping me from flying off out of my mind in the middle of organizing this, and just being the most amazing husband ever. And these two, who I love and adore madly, have also stepped in and have helped Jim try to organize what is everything that was in Dottie's mind that has been put on a piece of paper or a small card. There are millions of pieces of this, and it's all so interesting and precious. There's not enough time in life to sort of digest it. But I think the other most important thing that I learned about Jim and Dottie, that I've shared with many of them, is I didn't know they said this thing to each other, which is what I feel about her and what I feel you feel about her, is they would say to each other, I love you forever. And it's so intense when they would say it to one another. And so I would like to end it saying, Dottie, we love you forever. Thank you for joining us. And our friends, the Rutledge family drum group, would you like to give us a little farewell? That's it for the program. Enjoy, mingle. There's some artifacts over there too, if you want to take a peek at it. And maybe you're one of the people that sent her an airmail airgram to Australia. So check those out. Thank you.